The dust exploded around them like angry fireflies in the night. A dozen shadows pressed into the dirt, breath locked tight in their throats. And then came the whisper, ragged and desperate, crawling across the radio. "Who's shooting? Where's the pilot?" The words bled fear into the silence because no one knew. The ambush had come fast, brutal, and without mercy. Somewhere above the chaos, a bird had gone down, a pilot lost in the unforgiving darkness of enemy ground. The Navy SEALs crouched in silence, their backs pressed against the ruined skeletons of mud, brick walls, eyes searching the sky and the fields beyond. They were trained to expect anything, but the question burned through each of them. Was the pilot alive, or was this going to be a recovery instead of a rescue? The night smelled of metal and gunpowder. Sweat and dust clung to lips already cracked from days without rest. Somewhere beyond the hills, villagers had scattered, their silence now sharper than any scream. It was a silence that spoke of danger. And in that moment, with everything collapsing around them, a storm was coming. She had been flying low when the missile tracked her. The A-10 Warthog wasn't built for grace, but for survival, for fury, for thunder. And she had lived inside that machine like it was part of her skin, her veins. But now she was down hidden, breathing shallowly, every muscle screaming. She could hear the faint voices of men searching, the crunch of boots against gravel, the language she knew well enough to understand. They wanted her alive, but not for mercy. Her name was Captain Eliza Ward, 29 years old, fighter pilot, daughter of a father who had fought before her and a mother who prayed every night with hands trembling over the photo of her only child. Eliza carried their weight into every mission. Tonight, she carried it into enemy hands. Long before she became the woman whispering prayers into desert sand, she had been a girl standing in an empty driveway, waiting for a father who never came home. He had been a soldier too, one who fought with steel in his spine until the desert swallowed him whole. She remembered the uniforms that carried his folded flag, the silence of neighbors who didn't know what to say, the scent of her mother's tears against wool. From that moment, Eliza's path had been sealed, not out of vengeance, but because sacrifice was a language her family spoke. She had flown with that sacrifice carved into her ribs. She had learned the rattle of the Warthog's Gu-8 like a lullaby. And she had promised herself she would be the guardian others needed, the one who did not fail. Yet now, as dirt pressed against her lips and her radio hissed with dying static, failure seemed closer than breath. The SEALs didn't yet know her position. They moved through the night like ghosts, but even ghosts could bleed if they guessed wrong. Their commander listened to the whispers of the wind, waiting for a sign, and still, in the air hung the words, "Who's shooting? Where's the pilot?" Disrespect came in many forms. Sometimes it was a careless word in a crowded bar, where strangers dismissed the uniform as if it meant nothing. Sometimes it was a politician's empty speech. Tonight, it was the enemy treating her life as a trophy, her survival as entertainment. She was more than a pilot. She was a symbol, yet to those hunting her, she was only prey. She pressed herself into the shadows, silent, unflinching. Fear pulsed through her veins, but she swallowed it down the way her instructors had taught her. Silence could be power. Patience could be salvation. She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered something her father once told her, words carved into her mind. "The sky doesn't forgive cowards, Eliza, but it does remember those who stand." The footsteps grew closer. She could almost feel the vibration in the dirt. And still she stayed still, a statue carved from defiance. Far off, the SEALs had found tracks, boot prints, disturbed earth, a trail of broken reeds where someone had been dragged. And then the smallest sound, not loud, not obvious, but enough, a faint tap against metal, a pilot's hand signaling through silence. They knew the men spread out, their weapons raised, their hearts steady. The world seemed to shrink to a single pulse, a single mission: find her before they did. Eliza's eyes opened, catching the faint glow of moonlight. Her body ached, but her will was steel. She had no weapon left, but she had resolve. And then, almost like an answer to a prayer, the horizon trembled. It began with a low growl, distant but undeniable. Not boots, not whispers, not the clatter of rifles. It was deeper, heavier, a sound she knew in her bones. Reinforcements. They came not with banners or speeches, but with wings of iron. Another, a 10 warthog, her wingman, circling back after losing her on the radio. He had gone searching, refusing to abandon. The beast descended from the night sky like judgment itself. The enemy froze. For a moment their confidence cracked. They looked upward, fear bleeding into their movements. And in that pause the seals struck. Gunfire erupted. Shadows collided with shadows. The night broke open with violence, but within that storm Eliza remained still, breathing in the scent of dust and destiny. She heard the warthog's cannon thunder, ripping the night apart with a roar that shook the bones of the earth. It wasn't just a rescue. It was a declaration, a message carved into the battlefield. No one was left behind. The men who hunted her scattered, their courage unraveling as fire rained down. The seals reached her, their hands pulling her up, steadying her weight. One of them met her eyes, and though no words were needed, the truth hung between them like a vow. You were never forgotten. When she finally stood, her legs trembling but unbroken, she looked up at the circling warthog. The beast had become more than a machine. It was loyalty given wings. Her voice, cracked and hoarse, whispered words that would stay with them forever. They thought silence was weakness. They never understood it was strength. The seals carried her back, every step marked by shadows of sacrifice and echoes of her father's words. As they emerged from the battlefield, the horizon painted itself with the first light of dawn. Soldiers stood taller. Bystanders who had doubted now fell into silence, not the silence of fear, but of respect. In the years to come, those who were there would remember 3 things: the whisper that began in desperation, the silence that endured in defiance, and the thunder of wings that ended it with justice. And somewhere, etched into the marrow of memory, her words would remain: silent dignity is not surrender. It is the sharpest blade we carry. She would recover. She would fly again, and those who had once whispered, whose shooting wears the pilot, would carry the answer with them forever, because the storm that saved her was not just steel and fire. It was the unshakable truth that sacrifice is never wasted, and honor never abandoned. Even in silence, heroes speak, and when they do, the world cannot help but listen. So remember this story not as a tale of machines or missions, but as a reminder that somewhere, right now, someone stands silently between danger and safety, between chaos and peace. They do not ask for thanks. They do not ask for recognition. They simply endure. If this story moved you, share your thoughts, share your respect, and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe for more stories that honor the silent heroes whose strength reshapes the world.